So today I have the somewhat dubious honor of giving the first post-election day BBC. Although as of 12:30 today, the outcome is not yet clear and it may not be for a couple more days. But when preparing for this talk over the last few days, I was reflecting on a couple of things. One was the topic of my last BBC talk, which was about 3 weeks ago, in which I spoke about a line from the 7-point mind training text. That line was, always maintain only a joyful mind. And my experience over the last few weeks is that having talked about that helped me be more mindful of it, more careful about the state of my mind, trying my best to keep it joyful or at least positive, and not let the mind just go down a negative road, getting caught up in negative thoughts or feelings. So that made me feel really confident that it is possible to do that. If we really put effort into it, we watch our mind and take care of it when it does start to become unjoyful. And there's lots of methods for how to change that, how to make it more joyful, more positive. And I'll talk about some of these in this talk. And the other thing I've been thinking about before this talk was about what happened to my mind on this day 4 years ago, November the 4th, 2016, when I woke up to find out that the outcome of that presidential election was very different than what I expected and what I wished for. I'm sure many people here in the Abbey and also in this country had similar experiences. And I wasn't even here. I was in Denmark, which is kind of a very, sweet, peaceful little country. But I had been, watching the headlines, and I did vote. So it was a real shock that morning. And my mind slid into a kind of dark hole of depression, despair, unhappiness, fear, anxiety. But fortunately, only for about a half a day or 2/3 of a day, because I realized that such a state of mind was not only unpleasant, but also completely useless, pointless, and unnecessary, because there are alternatives. There are choices as to what we do with our mind, how we think, how we look at things. So I remembered the words of Shantideva, where he says, there's no need to be unhappy or worried about anything. If there's something you can do, do it. If there's nothing you can do, accept it. Being unhappy or worried doesn't do anyone any good at all. So that's kind of a paraphrase of that verse. But for me, that verse has been incredibly helpful whenever you find yourself facing problems or difficulties or unwanted circumstances. It's so helpful to remember that and practice it. So how did I get my mind out of that dark hole 4 years ago? There were a couple of things I did. One was just to remind myself of the nature of samsara, cyclic existence. It is unsatisfactory, it is unpredictable, full of dukkha, unwanted problems. So why be surprised when problems happen? When things don't turn out the way we wish, even if we think our ideas about how things should be are the best possible ones, because they are based on wisdom and compassion and ethics, and they will bring so much benefit to so many beings, we need to ask ourselves if it's realistic to expect that we can have control, that we can always get things our way. So as Mick Jagger used to sing, you can't always get what you want. I think he was onto something. So it's just a fact of life, a fact of samsara, that we don't have complete control over what happens. We can't always have things our way, even when it seems we are in the right. So it's best to just accept that. But does that mean we should just give up, become passive, apathetic, just focus on our meditation practice and forget the rest of society, the rest of the world? No. Especially those of us wanting to follow the bodhisattva path, the Mahayana path. In line with our bodhisattva vow, we have an obligation to help others as much as we can, to do what we can to relieve suffering, physical suffering, mental suffering, to bring about justice and equal rights for everyone, and so on. But we need to do these things without attachment or expectations about certain results. If we have fixed ideas about this is what I want to happen as a result of my efforts, my energies, then we're probably setting ourselves up for disappointment, frustration, and possibly anger. So it's best to try to find a balance between doing what we can, put our energy into doing what we can to make things better, but accepting our limitations and also accepting the limitations of samsara. This is, after all, not enlightened existence. We're not living in a pure land. And even if we were the Buddha, we would not be able to change people or change the world just by wishing things to be different. So I'm sure Buddha would agree with the statement by Mahatma Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the world. So that's something we can definitely do. Work on ourselves, live according to our ideals as to what is right, what is ethical, what is beneficial, what is based on wisdom, and do the best we can to be an example of how we would like others to be, how we would like the world to be. I really believe in that old saying, actions speak louder than words. Just being the way we would like others to be, the way we would like the world to be. So that idea was something else that helped me 4 years ago. I said to myself that no matter what's going on out there, in the country, in the world, in the government, and so on, I can still maintain my practice of Dharma. Nobody can take that away from me. Nobody can stop me from doing that. We can see that from the Tibetans who were thrown into prison, and their books and their prayer beads and so on were taken away from them, but they still had Dharma in their hearts, and they were able to practice Dharma even in those circumstances. So that's something we can always do no matter what's going on outside of us. And that's really the most important thing in life, the one thing that we can do to make our life meaningful and beneficial and to keep our sanity. And another thing I thought of back then that helped me was impermanence. So that's one thing about samsara that is definite. Things will change. Presidencies won't last forever. Presidents don't last forever. Governments and policies don't last forever. They change inevitably. And of course, we won't last forever. Life is really short. And does it make sense to spend precious time, even minutes, feeling angry, feeling bitter, feeling contentious, depressed when things aren't the way we wish? So our life can end at any point, any moment. And it's so incredibly important to have a positive state of mind at that time. So remembering that can really help us see how important it is to keep our mind in a positive state as much as we can, moment by moment. And then there's emptiness. If you have some understanding of emptiness, you can do a reality check. How am I seeing things? How am I looking at things? That person, that situation. Am I seeing them realistically or in an exaggerated way, much more real, solid, independently existing than they really are? So nothing exists independently. Whatever exists depends on many causes and conditions that occur over time and coming from many different directions. So that's the whole idea of dependent arising, and it's really helpful. It takes some time to contemplate that, but it really does help things to seem less solid, less concrete, less heavy and painful. And then there are the practices of compassion, loving kindness, tonglen. These are incredibly helpful in transforming a negative mental state into a positive one. So the practice of tonglen, or taking and giving, is something we can do when we're facing problems. We can think of other people who are facing similar problems or even worse problems than what we're going through, and generate compassion for them and decide to take on the suffering, the difficulties we are going through, with the wish that they will be free of theirs. So I find it really helpful to think of people who are in worse situations than oneself. For example, the Tibetans living in Tibet, or I don't know how to say their name, Uyghurs, Uyghur, is that the right word? In China, huh? Uyghurs. Yeah, these people are being put into these enormous prisons and indoctrinated and so on. The Rohingya in Burma, or refugee camps, and the people in Yemen and other places who don't even have enough to eat, enough to feed their children. So when you look at people in those situations, there's millions of people living in much worse situations than we are. Then looking at one's own situation, it doesn't look so bad, and even looks relatively good. So it's important to appreciate the good conditions that we do have, especially that we have the chance to practice the Dharma and really make good use of the situation that we have. So as this year's election was approaching, I decided that whatever the outcome will be, I will not let my mind go back down into that dark hole. That would be useless, unnecessary, counterproductive. So I've been preparing myself mentally for the worst. And other residents here in the Abbey have been doing the same and talking about it and sharing with each other, supporting each other. So I'm really determined to stay positive and optimistic and just try to look at things with a Dharma wisdom eye. For example, trying to imagine how the Buddha would see things, what the Buddha would say, what advice would the Buddha give about this. So I'm sure he would feel nothing but compassion, equal compassion and loving kindness for everyone involved, and equal commitment to help each and every one of us wake up and get ourselves out of this situation of cyclic existence. So let's all try to practice this way. And also today, there was a nice e-newsletter from Lion's Roar magazine with lots of little articles of advice from various Buddhist teachers, including Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo, Sharon Salzberg, Jack Kornfield, and so on how to face the current problems in the world with calm and wisdom, while still staying involved and doing what we can to remedy them. So if you haven't received that, you can probably Google it and find it online. So help yourself to some comfort food for the mind. Thank you.